it's kind of funny because when I came here earlier, we were practicing a bit, and people said, "Oh, what is your talk going to be about?" And I was like, "Oh, anxiety." And it's kind of funny when you think about it, because anxiety is often thought of this thing. It's like, oh, like scared of social interactions, like you're scared to get up on stage and talk to people, which, hence the irony here. But a couple weeks ago, when I really started prepping for this, and I started thinking about, well, what do I really want to talk about? And when I thought about the topic of anxiety, I thought, okay, I've seen TED Talks, people go through, they make bulleted lists, how can we help people with this topic? And so I was like, yeah, I could provide a PowerPoint, go over slides and be like, yeah, like fear stands for fun, E is for entertainment in the face of impossible odds, and like things like that. But I was like, no, if I'm gonna talk about anxiety, I want to talk about it a little bit more real, and I think the best way to go about it is through a story. So rewind a little bit, go back into my 5th grade year. At home I was dealing with a lot of what people might classify as daddy issues. So parents bickering and arguing, not really a healthy environment, as many of you could imagine. So going to school, I had a song stuck in my head, and I believe it was a Garth Brooks, Reba McEntire song, something definitely country. But when I got to school, the song got stuck in your head. I'm sure a lot of you have heard like Justin Bieber's new album. A lot of the songs are really catchy, and any of those songs, don't flag me for being a JB fan. But point being is, when you get a song stuck in your head and it's really good, you can't get it out. Sometimes it gets annoying, right? So imagine that, but a little bit worse. So I had this song stuck in my head, and with all the worry going on at home, for whatever reason, my mind was focused on that song. And so for the whole day, I had it stuck in my head. I just kept thinking of that Garth Brooks song. And then I went home, went to bed, came back the next day to school, the song was still stuck in my head. I was like, okay, this is fine. This happens for another week. The song is still stuck in my head. And I started to kind of get antsy. Whether it was pressure at home or whether it was something involving something up here, I can never be quite sure, but these compulsions started to happen. And from that point forward, I kind of realized what anxiety really was, or what I defined it as. Over the course of the next year, I started having issues to where I couldn't leave my house without flicking off the light switch a certain number of times. Before leaving the car, I had to turn the dial just right. I had to close the door a certain number of times. All of these really weird compulsions that you would think, what is this kid doing? And so it became really quickly obvious to my friends that something was wrong. But when you're told as a kid, when you're told as a boy on the playground that crying isn't manly, when you're dealing with all these issues at home, it's like, no, keep it quiet, keep it to yourself. It's really hard to reach out and try to find solutions to those problems. So time goes on, fast forward a little bit into my 7th grade year, middle school, and the problems just got worse. It got to the point where I had to drop pencils a certain number of times in the hallways. I couldn't go to class on time because I had to wait a full minute before a teacher turned the hallway, because it happened every single day. I had to say goodnight 5 times before actually going and laying down to go to sleep myself. So my family members, I had to go see all of them 3 times. These weird numbers, these weird compulsions, they trapped me in a mental prison. Up until my 8th grade year, I really felt alone. And I didn't know how to deal with this. When you're a kid and you're told that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, but you're afraid to step outside of your room before you watch that little light on your TV blink a certain number of times, you start to believe that that's a lie. We have a lot more to fear than fear. Honestly, a lot of the things that make up fear, whether it be parents, whether it be things at school, whether it's your own grades, because I'm sure a lot of us with finals coming up are afraid that we're not going to pass our classes. There's so much in our life that really makes up fear. And all of those worries, way back when, weighed down on me, and I didn't know how to deal with it. And those compulsions were my way, I guess, of coping. So 8th grade, I really started to think about it, and my mom finally confronts me because it got to the point where she noticed. And I kept it to myself. I was really embarrassed. But she says, Kyle, if you don't fix this, we're going to go have to see a doctor. And that's when reality really hit home. It's one thing to be looked at as strange by your friends, which really hurts. But for your own mom to look at you and say, there is a problem, the gears kind of started to turn. And I guess I started to ask myself, what were these impulses doing? So there was a day that I didn't turn the light switch off. I decided to stop looking at the TV. I decided I didn't need to turn the dial on the car before I left. I didn't need to touch the radio clock a certain number of times before leaving. I didn't have to wait for the teacher to turn around the corner. I experimented a little bit, and I was terrified. For these things that, for myself, I thought maybe these things are keeping me sane, maybe focusing on these little things, and I don't know how to explain it other than to say that it was just a routine. Breaking that was one of the hardest things that I've had to do in my entire life. And for some reason it worked. Just by telling myself that I didn't need to do these things, these little insignificant tasks in order to keep things safe, that if I didn't switch off that light switch, that somebody wouldn't die, that some tragedy wouldn't happen, that everything was actually going to be okay and life would continue on regardless of whether or not I did close that door. It was mind-opening for me. And I guess you could say this when things really started to change. You know, way back then, I was worried that if I did anything that was counter to those plans, that something tragic would happen. And it didn't really make sense in my mind. I just knew that I was trapped and I couldn't get out. So quite frankly, that's what I define anxiety as. I know a lot of us really have fear of, whether it is, like I said, grades. Maybe you're afraid of getting mugged or are in the third ward on campus, bad stigmas. There are a lot of things that we have that we could be afraid of. But quite frankly, looking back on all of that, if a kid in 8th grade can go through all of that by himself, be trapped in his own mental prison, all of us in this room are definitely capable of standing up to the fears that we have in our life. There's a funny saying that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And like I said, it's one of those things that we hold on to. It's one of those virtues that we've led to believe that it's the most true and core thing to our lives. But I do want to say that it's okay to be afraid. Frankly, I'm still afraid of many things. I'm still afraid of social interactions. Part of me is still afraid that once I leave this stage, I'm going to trip. I'm going to do something really clumsy. We're all afraid. And that is fine. What's not okay is leaving that fear appear and not reaching out to people and talking to them. The only reason for people to help you is if you reach out to them and let them know that you have something going on. If you're afraid, reach out. Ask people for help. Don't let that fear grip you, and don't let it tie you down. Because there are many people in this room that I'm sure if you had problems going on, whether it's the person over in the back row or the person up here in the front, all of us here, anybody in the human race really has this desire to give back, and I genuinely believe that. And it's not one of those things that you can narrow down to just, this one person has problems. No, we all have problems, and we all have things to be afraid of. But just tell the neighbor, tell your friend, get up, do something, and don't just let that fear stay inside. I encourage you to talk about it because a failure to fear starts with you telling someone that you are afraid. So I stand before you and I tell you that I'm afraid of talking to people. I'm afraid of many things, but I'm not afraid to tell you that I may need your help.